Hi, I'm Dr. Rochelle Haynes, founder and CEO of Potential Consulting. And in the next episode with Prosper, you can expect to find out more about how to manage a blended workforce and how to make the most of evolving technologies to leverage your workforce skills and to get the best out of the people in your company.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. Today, we're going to be diving into the future of work with none other than Dr. Rochelle Haynes. Now, Doctor, how are you doing today?
I am excellent. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm a little bit nervous
Yeah.
because I think the topics we're going to be jumping into today are literally going to be questioning my own existence. So
Oh
please
dear.
be kind.
I think you'll be all right.
Fantastic. And for those that are watching right now, if you've ever wondered how do you navigate the gig economy or just manage a blended workforce, especially these days where remote work is now the subject of the day, this episode is going to be your campus. Now, Dr. Rochelle Haynes is the trailblazer in human resources management, and she's the founder and CEO of PotentialConsulting Incorporated. Now, she comes with a PhD in international human resources management, and she actually coined the term gig HR. So if you ever see that term around, you know the person who it should be ascribed to. And this basically describes the strategic approach to managing gig workers, digital nomads, and remote teams. I know everybody went remote, especially after the pandemic. And although this is not a new phenomenon, so many of us are now being exposed to this. And this has presented quite a big minefield that so many people don't quite know how to navigate, whether you are on the receiving end or on the other end, where you actually have to lead people in different areas. So her insights have been featured in Forbes, and she's also collaborated with global entities like Bamboo HR, the Financial Times, and now the Online Prosperity Show. So today we're going to have a deep dive into the whole gig HR framework and its relevance in today's digital economy. And we're also going to be looking at the strategies for engaging and retaining a diverse remote workforce and all the things that are needed in order for you to keep them engaged and also productive. And also, you're going to be looking at the anecdotes and the findings that Dr. Haynes has found. Especially we will be looking at her roots in Barbados to becoming a global HR thought leader. And as you listen, I really want to find yourself in this story, and I want you to reflect on your own experiences with remote work, or maybe just managing freelancers. Have you actually faced any challenges or found innovative solutions that you're using that could help others? Please share those stories in the comments below so that we can actually start the conversations that will foster a happier existence for those involved. And if this episode resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe for more insights into the evolving world of work. And while you're at it, just share this episode with colleagues or friends that are navigating the gig economy. Now, Dr. Rochelle, I could go on and talk about things that I'm not even qualified about. You see, when I was researching into your topic, I heard you came from Barbados, and to me, Rihanna came to mind. What's it about Barbados that leads people to become global personalities?
That's quite a question. And thanks for asking. And I love that you've done your research in that area as well. I think growing up in Barbados, we've never seen ourselves as small, you know. We grew up with our motto is pride in industry. So we always grow up with this mentality of you can do your best, you can go as far as you determine. Um, and that is very much built into the Barbadian, let's say, economy and system. Like, right, like we have free education right up to tertiary level, so you're encouraged to constantly pursue your interest areas and to be. And in my family, personally, my parents always encouraged me to do my best. So I think we've always had that very global outlook. And we might be small, but we pack a big punch, and we're very impactful. Like if you come to Barbados, there's something you will notice. And I told my friends that some years ago who came to visit. I said I can't describe what you like about the island. Yeah, I mean beyond the regular things. But in terms of it being different from other islands, you will feel a vibe. That's the only way I can describe it. And then when they came back and I asked how they enjoyed it, they said, "You are so right. There's just a vibe." And I don't know any other way to explain it. But we've just always been very proud of who we are, very bold in our decisions. And we've always had that and maintained that global outlook.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. And it really shows there's quite a lot of exports or people that actually came from the Barbados. And
Yeah.
I like this is the first time that I've heard about this in that even though you're small, all you guys talk about even in school or in the family outlook as being of service to the
Mm.
rest of the world. Now, if that is not maybe the inclination of the child, is that like a expectation from the parents, or is it like you got to fit in with what's happening around?
I think it's like, and I've heard this also from my other Caribbean friends as well as my other African colleagues. If you grew up with Caribbean parents and African parents, you know you're always pushed to be your best. And there was a joke that we would make when we were younger. Your parents wanted you to be a doctor, lawyer, or a bank manager, and you would
Exactly.
even hear it in songs. So I think very much from the Caribbean and knowing that you're small, I think sometimes that desire to let's say still do your best and to be seen is coming from that sometimes that feeling that because you're small you might be overlooked. So I think because of that we know we're small but at the same time we command a presence. So I think it's like we were always encouraged to maybe stick your chest out and make sure your work will show who you are, your personality and what you bring to a team or what you bring to any sphere. You always shine that light where you are. And being very proud as well as a Barbadian, you will probably, if you meet a Barbarian, you'll get that sense of pride that's in that motto, pride in industry. There's always a sense of pride that this is the best place on earth. Sometimes, you know. I mean, every country has its frustrations, and of course, me as a Barbadian, I would gripe to other Barbadians about my frustration. But Barbados will forever be home. It's always a beacon for me, even living in England. So I think there's always that general pride in where you're from and that desire to show it off. And you see that too. You mentioned characters before like Rihanna, and you've seen with all of her success, she still constantly points the world to Barbados. So she still goes and she gives back. I think that's very much a part of who you are as a Barbadian to constantly represent and do well by your country.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, you did mention you being in the UK, and I'm in Australia, and I'm not quite sure if
Mhm.
it's the same in the
Yeah.
UK, but in Australia, they have this unspoken condition or rule amongst people, which is called tall poppy syndrome, which basically means
Sorry, can
you
you repeat that? It's called what?
tall poppy.
Tall poppy. Okay.
Yeah, tall poppy. So it's basically you're not meant to boast of your accolades. You're not meant to show off
Yeah.
or something like that. And it's just kind of subtle. Whenever you are in a place, people would just want to
Yeah.
be back in your sort of place. What's that now for you when you're coming from a place where you know what I mean? You're this flower, and somebody
Yeah.
cuts you to the core.
I
Or
think I think that's a very interesting question and a very relevant question because My first few years in Barbados, I came very much with this, I am Bajan, I am here kind of thing. I'm come to do my best and take over. And I mean, like, I came for a master's and I did the best on my master's. I got an award, I got a scholarship. That was my mindset. I was here to make an impact. I have found like, I've been in spaces, and sometimes it still happens where people expect you to play smaller.
Mm.
And I do find in general there's this sort of belittling culture where sometimes it's called banter and people put themselves down as a joke. Or if you
Yes.
ask someone how they're doing, they'll say, "Oh, I'm just fine, I'm just getting by," when that's not actually the truth. So I think recognizing that it's cultural. And I think before sometimes people perceived it, if I were too loud and too boisterous or whatnot, people perceived it as annoying or, oh, maybe she's arrogant and that sort of thing. I think I've come now over the years because there are times where I kind of try to fit in with that. But then I moved back to Barbados in 2022. My dad wasn't very well. I moved back because of that. And then I came back at the beginning of 2024. But that year and a half that I was back in Barbados just showed me, just interacting with my friends and seeing Bajans around me and how they moved again and feeling that energy. You realize actually, I realized I dim my light a lot to fit in with what I thought was the acceptable culture. Whereas back in Barbados, I got to shine it fully again. So I think coming back now to the UK, I've kind of adopted that. I'm like, no, I am not going to dim my light for anybody. This is a culture here. This is not my culture. If I am going to do amazing, I will aim to do my best with everything. And I'm not going to insult myself or put myself down and pretend that I am any less to make people feel comfortable. So I think that's been a very sort of transition, like evolutionary type of thing for me to experience why I was doing that, like dimming my light, not realizing why, not realizing it was because to kind of assimilate into the culture, but then being removing myself from that culture, recognizing that, and then coming back in has made all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. The reason why I'm asking this is most people that are offering some sort of employment are obviously based in somewhat of the first world. And from what I know in my experience traveling around Africa and all these other places, it's a whole different culture. You know, everyone is
Yeah,
even if they're
yeah.
need in poverty, you know, everyone is like, they're doing all right. And I'm like, bruh, you haven't eaten
And
for
you know, like I how I describe it sometimes, and again going back and forth, even just on holiday, I describe to people when they ask what's Barbados like. I said sometimes it feels like in the UK I'm living in black and white, and when I get to Barbados, the world is in color again. And I
again.
feel like I've heard there was an episode with Trevor Noah interviewing Burna Boy, and he was asking him, and why I noticed that you always represent yourself, like you're always the greatest, and I noticed you're very bold in your the things you claim about yourself. And his response was, because it is true, and it should be the same for you. You're Trevor Noah. If I ask you how you're doing, it shouldn't be I'm just getting by. You are Trevor Noah. You are amazing. So it was like this sort of he was kind of communicating sometimes what I think is felt. I think sometimes people put themselves down. I don't know if it's to make people feel better, but actually there shouldn't be a reason for it.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, you coined the term gig HR. First of all, congratulations on all your
Mm,
accolades, no matter what it is that
thank you.
you would have come by. Now, first of all, what inspired you to develop this framework and how has it evolved over time?
So So when I did my PhD was on the topic of international employees, so expatriates, and what do they do? Why do countries send them overseas? What's the purpose for that? What's the strategic value to companies? And when I finished that, while I enjoyed the topic, because me being an expat myself, working in a foreign country and whatnot at the time, I thought, well, yeah, this is so interesting. Let me see what's the impact. But then when I finished my PhD, I was looking for a new area of research, similar, but a different angle. And I had this student, I noticed it with my students because I was teaching at the University of Lincoln at the time. And I taught there for 4 years. And in the first year, students were coming to me and they were saying, "Hey, Rochelle, can you help us figure out how to fill in this application for this Siemens intern or for Google or these large companies? We want to apply for a graduate scheme." I said, okay. I noticed by like the third, fourth year, the questions were changing. The questions were, hey, Rochelle, can you direct me to which part of the university can provide me with resources to build my own business? I'm thinking of building my own app. I'm thinking of doing this project. I'm thinking of that. And then I had one student that came to me and said, hey, I've seen your research on expats and I want to be a digital nomad. How do I do that? And when he used that term digital nomad, I was like, there's something bigger going on here. So I started researching it. I started looking at how people were working differently, how work expectations were changing, and it's particularly across generations. So I started a research project where I teamed up with a company called Performance Works International. And what we did was we traveled across the globe doing interviews, surveys. We did more than 2,000 surveys with different types of companies. We did 33 interviews across Asia, Latin America, the US, and the Caribbean, and the UK, some in Europe as well. And what we did was to try to understand what were the new working desires that people had, what were the changing ways of working. And at the time, we described it as we were seeing a silent revolution occurring. So no one was talking about the way that work expectations and desire are changing. So we went to Indonesia. We were digital nomads there ourselves, working remotely, and we were trying to understand what were the pain points. What is it that people working remotely experience when they're working away that may harm or help the project? And we found a lot of things. We found that people who worked independently or remotely with companies, they weren't paid on time. Often the projects were misaligned. Often they were hired for one thing. Let's say they thought they were being hired for a marketing manager job, and they ended up with when they started the job, what they actually wanted was a virtual assistant. So there were a lot of issues. There was a lack of protection as well, where people could just take their services and then disappear without paying them and this sort of thing. So we wanted to find out also from the company side, what were their pain points? Companies were saying lack of data protection. We're worried about our information security. Sometimes the quality of people that we hire, we're worried about, and we don't always have the access that we would like to these people. So noticing that there was that gap, that's where we came up with this idea of gig HR, from our research findings. And we published our research findings in February 2020. And the main thing that those findings said, it was a report, an industrial white paper called The Blended Workforce Revolution that I published with my business partner, Jeremy Blaine from Performance Works. And the main thing that we said is the world of work is not ready, one, to work in different ways or remotely. Companies are not set up to work remotely or to lead hybrid, remote, or blended teams. And then we put forward a framework for how they can do this. This was really interesting in the timing because we published that in February 2020. March 2020, we all know what happened.
Wow.
So we had been talking about it since 2019. And I presented at a conference before in the Caribbean, where after I presented at the conference, a news reporter interviewed me about it. And then when he published the article, our radio host responded saying, "This is impossible. We can't have remote work here. This is out of touch and whatnot." Basically, I was called a quack. But then a month later, the whole world was forced to work remotely. So these things kind of got accelerated. So this idea of gig HR, it was a framework that we created to guide companies through being able to work with a team of full-time, part-time, and independent workers. Since then, gig HR has evolved to what we've now trademarked as well, called open HR. And what we've done there is that's really a response also to some of our research, because we did find that some independent workers didn't like being referred to as gigsters. And they were saying they felt like it was gig workers are always seen sometimes as more casual, whereas they see themselves as highly skilled consultants. So then we thought, well, open HR, because this is open access to work, open access to workers, we pivoted towards open HR. And we created this framework that's in the form of a house. It's called the Open House, and that house has 4 major rooms, which is rules, tools, skills, and thrills. I always say, don't try to say that 5 times fast. But what those 4 rooms reflected was a roadmap for organizations to create an environment that would allow them to work with different types of workers. And now, given the time and the changes and the developments since we published that study in 2020, because we only published the book last year, we've also considered how companies can work also with AI. So in that, we have the rules. The rules look at, okay, what type of future of work strategy might you need? How might you break down the types of talent and how you use those talents and look at the anatomy of that in your company so you're deploying people in the most strategic way. The tools look at your digital infrastructure. What kind of setup do you need, whether it's a VDI, whether it's in terms of your information, and VDI, I mean virtual desktop infrastructure, or also in terms of your information security and compliance. How do you build a tech and tool ecosystem that allows you to work with different types of workers? The other thing also is the skills, the room that's considered the skills, which looks at what upskilling does your people need? Does your people need in order to work effectively with different types of people? Because this is a mindset shift. And this is the main thing that we've noticed as well, that this is largely a mindset shift. And most of the time, the problems aren't infrastructural, the problems are at the top. So we do a lot of leadership training in my consultancy because sometimes the biggest pushback is from leaders who thinks that this is the way things have always been done and this is how things must be done. Then we have the thrills room. So the thrills is looking at how do you create a system that rewards different people for working in different types of ways? What are the communication mechanisms that you might need to build deep integration and deep engagement with these individuals? And how do you also create future opportunities for this new blended workforce, not just for your employees, but for those you work with independently as well? So that's the four elements, the four main elements, I should say, of that open HR framework. And it can be found in the book. The book is structured around the chapters of that framework, as well as looking at the culture and the foundational things that you need as well. So that's kind of a journey of where we started to where we are, how we got to actually publishing that book on open HR.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking us on that, very clear ride. Now, when you started, obviously on this journey, one of the things that you mentioned you did was to travel exclusively to these places where remote work was being done and things of that nature. It kind of feels like you were being paid to be on holiday.
It felt that way, and I've had that comment a lot from I've made that joke often because I've presented because I lecture as well. So I presented at universities my research. And I said literally it was that some days we were, so for example, we went to Jakarta, we presented at some universities there, we partnered with, we did some training there as well. And then I went on to Bali after, and in Bali, basically, and it was very interesting the research approach in this way because initially me and my research partner, who was a German research colleague, he was actually the student, he was a mature student who gave the idea of the digital nomad in the first place. His name was Anas Hajbein, and we went to Bali together and we were going around at key remote working hotspots, these what is co-working centers, and we were going from center to center like salesmen asking people if we can interview them. People were so rude to us. Some of them like slammed the door in our face. They said you can't come any further than our patio. These guys who were really friendly to us because they thought we were guests at the co-working, co-living space. When they realized we were researchers, they completely shut down and kicked us out. And then we realized what we needed to do was to become a digital nomad. And quite frankly, we were already. We just weren't really owning the role. We were working remotely. We had our laptops. So we decided we're going to pay to stay in one of these co-working centers. And we did that and we made friends and then we explained some of the research that we were doing. And only through forming those relationships, they were more open to talking with us. But to answer your question, some of it was done like over surfing. Some of it was done over dinner. Some of it was done over yoga and beach cleanups. So it was a really, really fun and interesting way to conduct research.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just gonna obviously pose this question for those that are at the back of the room, that might not have the opportunity to ask you this. Does the laptop lifestyle actually exist, or is it just something that
Mhm.
is a picture on a deceptive Facebook ad?
There are several WhatsApp groups that I'm in, expat WhatsApp groups, that will prove that it very much is alive and well. And a lot of research out there supports it. So if you look at research from MBA, MBO partners for the last 2, 3 years, they've shown that there's been an uptick in people working remotely of 131%. And this economy is worth 5 billion and it continues to grow. So this is very fruitful, and one of the things that we're seeing is we're in an let's say a time, a very disruptive time where job security is becoming very, let's say, tentative and not guaranteed. Where people, let's say, have been laid off, people, let's say, have decided since the pandemic that actually their priorities are different. They're choosing to work remotely or pursue more independent opportunities so they can increase their income in some cases, better balance their work life, and just have an experience that really supports a better quality of life. And in saying this, I do recognize that there is a lot of pushback that we're seeing now from larger companies around remote work. We're seeing a lot of return to work policies and whatnot. And regardless of these things existing, it won't change the mindset that has already begun to shift. It won't change that evolution. And we're never saying that 100% of the workforce will work remotely, but that drive for remote and more independent work continues to grow. We've seen a lot of people also leaving companies or refusing to accept positions unless they have some level of flexibility built into them as well.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I think there has to be a mindset shift, because those that are
Mm,
fully forcing people to come back to work might
yeah,
also be alienating themselves from the right talent that could be working
massively.
elsewhere. Now, how can an organization, or have you gone that far, maybe foster inclusivity
Yeah.
amongst full-time employees that are getting all the perks, the pat at the backs, and those that are freelancers who are working remotely that don't have access to things of that nature?
So, one of the things we tend to say to employers is if it is that you think you have to watch your employees to make sure that they do the work, then there's something wrong with your organizational culture. You are sending off a lot of alarm bells there. And also, a lot of companies treat workers in different ways, or let's say, part time or independent workers to a lesser standard. They do that to their own detriment. Because with more of the workforce moving in that direction, you are alienating half of your talent. Another thing is that most companies have significant challenges that they have been struggling to solve for years. And most companies don't realize that the people best fit to solve those challenges not exist within their company. So there's some really great examples that we give in the Open HR book, and that you can also find in John Windsor's book, Open Talent. So John Windsor's book was published before my book, and he looks at the growing open talent economy and innovation in that economy. And one of the things he also endorsed, he was the one that endorsed our Open HR book. He's a executive resident at Harvard. And one of the things that he highlights, and that we also highlight in Open HR, is that you have sometimes you're trying to solve a challenge for years and your employees are spending years trying to solve a challenge, and you bring in a freelance employee that solves that same challenge in a matter of weeks. And often because the systems that organizations have built in and the very linear and boxed in and traditional way does not often allow employees to be as innovative as they would like. But also the other issue is it does not allow really for the transferable skills and those adjacent skills to really, really do their job and really benefit the firm. So a great example that John Windsor gave in his book was of when NASA was trying to solve this issue with vibration. They were trying to stop this vibration from breaking the glass in this sort of satellite project. And they had the best engineers in the world to try to solve this issue. And they couldn't get it done. These people spent about 10 years or more trying to solve this issue. And then they got a violinist, a freelancer who was a violinist to solve the problem. And they solved it, I think, in a matter of months. And the issue there, how they were able to solve it, is because in the musical field where they have to think about vibrations and the impact of vibration, they were able to transfer that experience to solve this issue related to the satellites in NASA. So a lot of companies are not utilizing the people in their company to their full benefit. So let's say, for example, Prosper, let's say you are an accountant and you are working in Microsoft in their accounting department. And Microsoft has some major issues there that they've been trying to solve. But let's say you also moonlight or you have a hobby as a coder. Let's say also you're great at karaoke. Let's say, I don't know, you are an excellent podcaster, a social media influencer. There are a lot of transferable skills from those other activities that can be used to solve problems in your accounting department or even across other departments. But because of how we structure work in a very job-based and linear way, rather than really registering the full breadth of skills that each employee possess, we are only technically using about 5% of an employee's ability, which means all of that money you're paying for that employee to exist within your organization, you're not getting 95% of the value. So where you have a person that's working across different companies, a person that's working in their own space, in their own time, and they have their different independent projects, a person with very different life experiences. So for example, refugees, and I've worked with a lot of charities and open talent agencies. For example, M.E.D.I.A is one of them, M.E.D.I.A charity, which focuses on getting remote work for refugees in the global south. I've worked as a mentor with them to help these refugees get into global positions. And those refugees, with their very unique experience of being a refugee, in addition to them, let's say, being hired for remote work in the tech industry, because of their experience in that, let's say that refugee, that I don't just want to say trauma, but that experience, that situation, there are certain skills and lessons that they're also able, that will also benefit the company when they come in, let's say, as a tech analyst or whatnot. So I think because of that very traditional mindset, a lot of companies do not actually use the majority of the skills of the people that they hire. So it's really important for us to shift that mindset to understand, or well, to really leverage the breadth of skills and also to create more interesting work. A lot of younger generations are saying that they want more interesting work. They're bored in the workplace. They want more exciting projects. And to create a sort of skills-based network and a sort of blended workforce where you're offering different opportunities and challenges and the ability to work with different types of workers, then you offer a much more interesting and impactful experience of work.
Absolutely. And you went on and you established crowd potential consulting. Obviously, that's something that you're working on right now. And we're obviously going to start painting a picture of what it is that you do specifically. And
Yeah.
are you hiring anyone that has got violin skills? Because apparently it's not rocket science to figure out how to stop
Yeah.
vibrations in space.
Yeah. Yeah. So Crowd Potential, we initially started our company in 2020. And what we've done is a mixture of different things. So I work with companies in different ways. A lot of it tends to be around training, but most of the stuff I tend to do is I work with a team of, similar to myself, contingent workers, people who have their own companies, but that we partner together on projects. So I would say I have a very sort of contingent workforce. I don't have employees, but I have a workforce that's readily available when projects come up. Some of the things that I've done include keynotes. I would do a lot of keynotes for companies or organizations or institutions. I do a lot of organizational diagnoses. So I go into companies, I review their systems, and I say, hey, this is how you can do things better. This is what's holding you back. This is how we can use open HR to help you make this company not just more modern, but more innovative and more engaging. And sometimes that's It could be a process as short as a few weeks, or it can be depending on the company, or it can be a process where we chop that process up over a few months. And depending on the relationship with the company, I do have some retained clients where they would ask us to come in for specific things. So we do the initial training and then we come back in for elements of the transformational process. A big part of what I do, because we find the main issue is leadership transformation. So I do a lot of leadership transformation retreats and workshops just to help leaders understand that this is not the only way. The traditional way needs to be challenged. And one of the things I say to leaders a lot is that while you are griping and complaining that your, let's say, millennials, your Gen Zers are challenging the way that work is done, are challenging the practices that have been there for 10, 20, or 100 years, the question you should be asking yourself is, why have you never asked the questions? Why have you never challenged in the same way? So we tend to have that sort of conversation, and then we guide leaders into how to think differently. And one of the best feedback I've gotten from a client recently, I was kind of doing an interview where I was following up on finding out what's the value that they've gained. And they said, Rochelle, the main thing, well, they said you're kind of like an organizational therapist. I never thought of that before, but I thought that was an interesting description. They said, we just know that anytime there's a problem, we can pick up the phone and call you to get this shifted. But then the other thing they said is that you taught us that there is another way. And they said for their entire time, they thought there was one way of doing things. And they were pushing that and pushing that and pushing that through. And what was happening was that their best people were leaving. But now they understand actually there's a different way to lead, and that's reaping results for them. So often, a lot of the barriers that companies face tend to be from a leadership level and from a leadership or management mindset shift that needs to occur.
Absolutely. And obviously, you would have come across so many leaders that actually think you're showing up threatens their existence. What's the sort of response that you get normally when you rock up to a business? I'm thinking you're one of those people that would just come in with a clipboard, and then you the CEO just assigns you a corner in the boardroom and says, you operate from there from today, and all the other leaders are just looking at you weird, thinking, what's been the response from those leaders that normally then get the brunt of the work that you're doing?
It's the complete opposite. And I think it's because I would describe myself as a very approachable person and a very I get along with people very well. I'm very friendly. So one of the things I tend to do is I start with a very relaxed process where we're having a meeting, but it's not me presenting to any one person. I am there to have a conversation with that organization. I'm there to listen, to find out what it is that they've been experiencing and how that's been either helping or hurting the company. And then as I'm listening, I might give feedback along the way. But in that initial conversation, I'm really just listening to find out what are the pain points. But then the next thing I do as well is I go and I do the same with employees. I also listen to them. And sometimes where there's a fear of, let's say, retribution for speaking up against management or so, something I've done a session where, for example, I was online, I used like a tool like Mentimeter, and I gave employees the opportunity with management on the call. I gave them the opportunity to give all of their frustrations and whatnot online so managers could see, but they could do it anonymously. So using a tool like Mentimeter, managers were in the room and employees are sharing all the Mentimeter answers or popping up, but they're completely anonymous and they can see all of the common issues that workers are highlighted. There was one I did and there were about 56 responses in that meeting. And managers were very shocked at how employees felt. And they were very open to it because they knew that change was needed, but they didn't know what was the exact problem, or they didn't know the issue that was getting to employees the most. So I tend to do a mixture of both having those initial conversation with leaders, but also having it with employees, and then discussing how we can bridge the gap and what's needed on both sides. And I think where you have clients that are open to that and to open to first breaking down those walls, then it's not perceived as, okay, this consultant's been brought in to fix things or fire people or to shake up everything we've done. It's like, no, I'm actually here to help you. And how can I be of service to you? And I think that approach really kind of is disarming. I found it that it's very disarming. So people never approach me in this way of, what's she doing here? Instead, they approach me with, come let me tell you. Let me tell you what's going on. Can you fix this? Kind of thing. And I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Now, Rochelle,
Mm-hmm.
you strike me as, I don't know if you've ever watched in the movies where, everybody, the company's at a standstill and nothing is moving. And every one of the, C-suite is in the boardroom and their jackets are behind their chairs and everyone is just sweating to want to figure out the solution right there. And now everybody is now out of solutions, and then we get
Mm-hmm.
the intern who's just sitting in the corner with holding their notebook like this, and then they just slide a business card to the chief CEO's side, and then the card says, Rochelle Haynes, send a chopper. I feel like you're the send a chopper lady for when things have gone wrong within a business and people really need recourse. Now, if
Yeah.
a CEO is watching this right now and they want to send a chopper, where on the internet would they go and find out where to deliver the chopper?
I love that phrase, send a chopper. Never heard that before. Very interesting. They can go to my website. So www.crowdpotential, CROWD, crowdpotential, .co.uk. So crowdpotential.co.uk, or they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I reply to my messages quite quickly. Dr. Rochelle Haynes. So those are the two main ways to contact me. Or my email is contact@crowdpotential.co.uk. But yeah,
Absolutely.
and yeah, you described it perfectly. That's typically the experience I have. People call me in when they know, okay, either something isn't working, or I get the opposite as well. They call me in when things are going really well, but they want to take it to the next level. And I enjoy that experience as well.
Absolutely. Nah, because obviously living on an island and you're just sitting there at home and then you're busy climbing trees, eating mangoes, and then a chopper just
I won't lie. I won't lie. While there are a lot of stereotypes about the Caribbean, one thing that is true is we love our mangoes. I'm gonna play with that one. I judge a person if they don't like mangoes. I won't lie.
fantastic. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes below and moving forward. But I think it would be remiss for me to not ask this, Dr. Rochelle. I mean,
Mhm.
you have coined a term that is going to be very synonymous with the way people are working, which is gig HR. You were, obviously launching white papers before everybody knew what was happening. And 1 month later, everybody's now just coughing in their elbows and socially distancing, and
I
people are
had nothing to do with it. Let me just say that.
considering you're almost 1 month before everything else just
I didn't plan
happens.
it.
Where do you see the gig economy heading in the next decade? And I want you to maybe have a look at it in this way. Just before we jumped on the call today, I
Mhm.
was reading somewhere that LinkedIn is going to lay off about 6,000 people that were working within the company. And not that it's for them to increase their profits or anything. They've actually really done well. I think they've actually had a 27% increase in their turnover and things of that nature. But these 6,000 people are definitely going to be looking for some sort of employment. And that might be, the gig economy that might get an influx of such people. What is your take on this, and where do you see the gig economy heading in the next decade?
Yeah, I've read some similar headlines to you, and it's really a shame to see what's happening in a lot of tech firms and the ability for them to do that and just change people's lives so drastically. And just thinking about numbers rather than thinking about people. I think while initially that seems like it's going to benefit them in the short term, I think there's still an impact of that in the long term. Even I've heard companies that are saying that they're going to reduce their staff because of developments in AI and AI replacing certain job roles and whatnot. AI also presents opportunities to create new job roles and to create new, let's say, sources of innovation. And I think what's going to happen, and what I'm seeing definitely in the open talent space, is that through the use of AI and automation, people can start businesses a lot quicker than they would in the past. People now have AI employees. So a lot of people that are being laid off will actually, some of them will become competitors to the same companies that laid them off. So I love that about the internet and tech developments, that once you have internet, you have the ability to make money. So
Mm.
even if you have lost your job security in this job, maybe company that I think you mentioned LinkedIn that laid off 6,000 people. Yeah, if you're able to use your transferable skills, if you're able to use your experience and whatnot, and use that and go online and create a new source of income for yourself, you now have the ability to build an entire workforce out of using AI that would cost you a lot less. So we do look at the fact that there's a challenge with AI replacing certain jobs and certain job roles, but at the same time, it also facilitates small business growth as well. So I really hope that those that find themselves in that situation, and it's really unfortunate. And I do worry about this period that we're going through, this kind of finite period of a certain very toxic type of leadership where it's all about the bottom line. One, those companies will pay in the long term for that. But two, some of those employees will become their competitors. And I pray for their sake they will go on to have better lives than they did in those companies. But I think because of AI and the ability to create a business and the ability of chat GPT and other forms of Gen AI and also forms of automation, that actually it will be a lot quicker and a lot, let's say, economical for those persons who have laid off to actually get their businesses up and running. I'll give you an example. Like in my organization, yes, I have contingent partners, people that other consultants that own their own firms, and we team up for particular projects that need certain specialty. But in terms of my background, things like, let's say, sales, marketing, social media, that sort of stuff, I have 3 dedicated Chat GPT employees. So I think where you are able to build out Chat GPT and use AI to create employees and, let's say, personas that can serve your business, then there's still hope of coming out of that situation in a positive and hopefully a way that is sustainable for the person that's been laid off. So that's my hope for them.
Absolutely. And from what you have said, I think maybe just really going in to learn classical instruments, you never know when NASA is going to call, you know?
Absolutely. Stick to those music lessons.
Fantastic. Now, Dr. Rochelle, I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. I mean, your
Absolutely,
expertise
my pleasure.
and what you've created is going to be the roadmap for so many people, that are looking for innovation in today's workforce. So I can't, thank you enough for the time you spent with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
Absolutely. And obviously, for those that are watching right now, Dr. Hayes' journey underscores the importance of adaptability and innovation in today's workforce. And obviously, her insights over um, the work and the future of work really offer valuable guidance for anyone that's looking to navigate the complexities of the gig economy and remote work. So while you were watching, I know obviously you were taking a lot of notes, but right now I want to invite you to just maybe reflect on your organization's approach to managing a blended workforce and from what Dr. Rochelle has said. Try and just implement just one strategy that has been discussed today so you can enhance that team cohesion. And if you find that there's still a lot more things that need to be pieced together, I'll be putting in the links on how you can send a chopper to Dr. Rochelle so that she can help you integrate your remote teams and also address any challenges that might be, coming your way. So stay tuned for more insightful content like this on the Online Prosperity Show. And I've heard that in the next episode, we're going to be diving into strategies that will help you achieve a happier and more fulfilling work-life balance. So stay tuned. Until then, keep striving for more prosperity in all your endeavors. Bye for now.